Maybe you have already heard the word TDD or test-driven development from time to time, or maybe you have already watched videos about how to implement a calculator in command line with a test-driven development approach. But this video will show you how to do that in React and in the browser. So there will be a to-do list application like this one. So essentially it's a to-do list. You can add items to it, like buy some milk. Once it's added to the list, you can mark it down by clicking the button at the end of the row. The data will be gone if you refresh the page. And yeah, we're not going to save the data anyway. So eventually you will have a working application with very good quality built-in, which is why we are going to use the test-driven development approach. And after this video, I hope you can apply this to your day-to-day work as well. I can't wait to show you how to do it. Let's get started. So we are going to use the create React app to create our application. So it's npm create React application by using the TypeScript as a template. So by default, the create React app will create a JavaScript version, and we would like it to create a TypeScript because it's more modern. And we'll call our project as buy some milk. Even it's just a to-do list, we just give a better name. Yeah, it will install all the dependencies for React, and it will set up all the testing infrastructures, the TypeScripts, and so on and so forth. It will give you some instructions how to run the application. So yeah, basically we can follow that quite literally. We cd to the buy some milk and npm start. So it will launch a application in the browser. So this is the default application. When you after install this create React app, it will launch this UI. But we're not going to use any of this. So let's jump into the code directly. We are in this just a created folder. So in this video, we are going to use WebStorm to as our IDE. I'm not going to use VS Code or anything like that because it's much more powerful, easier for you to run the test and do the refactor as well. So we're going to use this WebStorm as our working place. What's the first step of testing-driven development? You may say it's a write a test. It's yes and no. We definitely need to write a test upfront, but what test should we write is the very first step. Like we need to split the whole requirement into small steps, and we will implement one step at a time. That's called tasking. That's actually the very first step of applying TDD. So let's start it with our first test. So we can create a folder here called tests. That's how they just working, right? And then let's create a file called to-do test.tsx. Okay, now we have this file. We can start to describe our specifications or our test. So normally, so one way to do it is we use describe. That's kind of you describe what you are trying to do as a test. So we are describing the buy some milk app, and inside that we would like it to, let's say we want to run a single item as the first step, and then we will try to run multiple items. So we can break the whole requirement into small steps. Let's say 1 we can render a item, and the 2 we can render multiple items, right? In that stage, we will be able to render any given number of items as a list. And the third step will be we can add item to a list, right? It's like adding new items to a list, and the first one maybe, mark an item as done, remove it from the list. By implementing these steps one by one, eventually we will have that working application. It is a good practice to have a list like this before you write any testing code. Then I will give you a brief of what you are going to do. It's like a to-do list to yourself as a programmer. And once you finish one of them, you can mark it done. That will give you some idea of where are you, and if you want to stop at any time and then come back tomorrow, you will see exactly where you stopped and pick it up from there. So we will have this list here, but yeah, it's just a preference. You can have it in a post-it or any kind of mechanism you prefer. So our first test will be run the atom, right? So let's say we renders an item from the list, and what we're going to do here is, so in a test there are normally 3 steps. The first one is do some preparation, like you need to set up some data or prepare some data or mock, do some dependencies preparation. And the second step will be you do some action based on this setup. Maybe in our case it's just we call the render function, and passing our component. And then the third step will be the assertion, like you verifying something to be true or to be false, or some element is rendered on a document. That is a very common one. So for example, we will need to prepare a array of data, like maybe we call it items or to-dos. We give it an empty array. We will give it one item here, let's say buy some milk, right? This is the preparation, and then we will do a action. We run a to-do which doesn't exist yet, and we'll pass in some data to that component. This is action, and then we are expecting from the screen there will be a text on the UI, which is exactly what we put here. We want this to be in a document, right? Even you can see there are some arrows. It's pretty clear that we have 3 steps. 1, the arrange or preparation. 2, the action, like we're doing something here, and then the assertion. So now let's import this render from the testing library React, and screen as well is from that package. Now we kind of have this structure for the first test, right? But if we run it now, it will fail because the to-do is not defined. You can either run it in a terminal here if you're using web store, or you can run it in the IDE without leaving the IDE. You just using the shortcut. It's Ctrl+Shift+R, and it will run the test. But the terminal one will watch all your changes. Whenever a change happened, it will run the test automatically. Again, it's just a preference. So here it says the to-do is not defined, right? So we will quickly fix that by create a function called to-do. So in TDD, we will have the field test first, and then we will make the test passing as quickly as possible, as simple as possible as well. And then we will remove the duplications or do some refactoring based on the passing test. So here we are not at this stage yet, so the to-do is not defined, so we will create the function component here to make it at least have the purple failure. So now it failed because unable to find element with the text buy some milk. This is a purple failure, right? The previous one is not the failure we are looking for, right? So this kind of like to-do is not defined stuff is a infrastructure error, which we need to fix that as soon as we can. But once we have this purple failure, buy some milk cannot be found on the UI, that's a purple fail, and we will need to fix that now. So what's the easiest way to fix this? It might surprising you, but the easiest way is to fake it. Let's say here we just return the text. It passed, right? You may think, oh, it's not, it's cheating, right? It is, but at least it's making the test passing. The benefit of this fake is that we have some kind of code that working. Let's say we have to-do component, even it's a function component which is lives inside the test, but it's a component. It's kind of driven us to create this component from a test, even it's fake. But at the moment we don't need to do any refactor yet, because it's too simple and we don't have much code or logic to abstract. And then the next step will be we will make it slightly real. Let's say we want to render another item other than the buy some milk. So we can actually duplicate this one. Let's say we have buy some apples here, and we will expect it's buy some apples, right? So test will fail again because the buy some apples cannot be found. So that gives us opportunity to look at the current implementation again. So it's need to be the first item from the list. So we can still like kind of fake it items 0, whatever you passed in, I will return it. The only problem is we need to wrap it inside a HTML element like that, and we save again. Yes, we are not extracting the item from the props. So now if we run test again, it will pass, right? Because it's always picking up the first item. So now that's like a minimum viable product of our to-do. you may think, oh, it's cheating again. Yes, it is. But now we have a more clear interface between our test and our implementation, right? So now we have a to-do component which accepting items, which is a string array, and it will work with that passed in items. It will fail again if we try to run the multiple items, right? Which is totally fine if we let's duplicate the previous test and say multiple items, and we will put these two. We will kind of merge these two together, and we will duplicate this one by some milk, and we run test again. You will see here it cannot find the by some apples. In IDE, in a WebStorm, you will see some dotted line beneath this get by test. That indicate which statement is failing. So in this case, it's by some apples, because it's always running the first item according to our implementation, which is kind of fine, right? We now using this test to drive what we need to implement in our code. So now we will need to make it more real. We will iterate through this this item, and for each item we will put them into a span or anything like that. And if we run the test again, now they're all passing, like 1, 2, 3, they're all passing, right? The only problem is that it has some warnings on the console. It says like in the list you need to put a key, unique key for each items, but we don't have that yet. So that's a good sign for us to do some restructure of our code. So for multiple items, especially, we need to change the data structure a little bit to make each item unique. So let's give it a ID for each of them, ID 1 by some milk, and this one is content like that, and ID is ID 2, right? So now you can see the interface is mismatching now. We need to update the items to a composed data structure which has ID and content. So instead of using string directly, we need to define an interface here called to item. And it has the ID as a string and the content as string as well. So now we will have this to-do item as a input, and then we will put a key item dog ID, and this will be the item content, right? If you run test again, it will passing, but the first two will fail because yes, we are not changing the structure yet. So the content will be here, and the ID 1, and for that one as well. Actually, when we have this render add working, and this one we can get rid of it because it's just another copy of the test. It's basically testing the same thing, right? So we don't need it anymore. So in our test we have the single item and the multiple items, and they are all passing, and we don't have any warnings on the console or anything. So now, based on our definition, the red green refactor, right? We know in a green state, and we can do some refactoring. So the first thing we would do is to move this component into their own file. In WebStorm, it's pretty easy. We just using the refactor shortcut, it's F6. It will try to extract this function into a file, which we will put it in outside, and we will want this to-do item to be there as well. So we do the refactor, and yeah, it's moved over there. So now our test and implementation are detached. So in our test, we don't have that weird component defined on top. And in the implementation, we probably need to convert this as a row function. That's all I have for today. I hope you enjoy it and maybe learn something from it. That's awesome. If you haven't yet, please consider to subscribe and like it. If you have any questions or if you want to learn something else from me, please comment below. And until next time, see you.